We need you to step into discomfort. We need you to take some arrows. We need you to break some eggs.
From Interfaith Alliance, this is The State of Belief. I'm Interfaith Alliance President Reverend Paul Brandeis Raushenbush in Massachusetts.
We need you to sacrifice some of your comfort in the present moment for the long term. Because, folks, nobody is going anywhere.
It's a moment of great uncertainty for our nation. That's always scary, but also it's an opportunity. This week, I'm looking forward to talking with a really smart observer of the American scene, a man who writes with both wisdom and wit about our culture and our democracy, Wajahat Ali. We'll talk about presidential politics, Christian nationalism, and what opportunity for progress looks like in 2024. As we keep growing our library of extraordinary interviews, I want to make sure you're subscribed to the State of Belief podcast. Please visit stateofbelief.com/subscribe. You'll hear this episode in full, as well as recent interviews with Jeff Charlotte, Dr. Jamar Tisby, Rabbi Sharon Brous, Rob Reiner, Dr. Anethea Butler, John Pavlovitz, Bishop William Barber, and many others. It would really help us to have you subscribe, rate, and tell people you're close to about all you're hearing. The State of Belief is made possible in great part by the generous support of our listeners. If you made a donation already, thank you for helping get these conversations heard by more people who need them. If you haven't pitched in yet, information on how to do that is available at stateofbelief.com, and you can find out more about the work of Interfaith Alliance and join us at interfaithalliance.org. And now to my guest. Wajahat Ali is a Daily Beast columnist, a writer, commentator, and keen observer of what this country seems to be doing to itself. His powerful book is titled Go Back to Where You Came From, and other helpful recommendations on how to become an American. Waj has a Substack titled The Left Hook, and he also co-hosts the Democracy-ish podcast. The child of immigrants, he's an invaluable contributor to the conversation around patriotism, diversity, and democracy, and I am very happy to have him back on The State of Belief. Waj, thank you so much for being here.
Paul, you should be my publicist. You made me sound amazing. Thank you.
You
the whole
are
time
amazing.
I'm like, that person sounds dope. That person, my wife. You should say that to my wife.
Listen, we haven't even talked about how awesome your wife is. I should lead with that because that's
you should
definitely
always lead with the spouse. We both married up. Correct.
Well, I mean, is it okay? Is it okay to mention how awesome your wife is? I don't mind starting there because she's this incredible doctor and it just does so much great work. Can you mention her? I just think it's really great for context.
I'm not just saying this to get husband equity, but I did marry my wife, Dr. Sarah Qureshi, does remarkable work at Georgetown. She's a family medicine doctor and a health practitioner who cares about community health from the ground up. And she has basically spent her time volunteering almost her skills to help introduce the concept of health equity and racial disparity within the healthcare industry, and training these young doctors to look for their biases, right? To undo their biases. Yeah. She's also helped victims of trauma. She's gone and traveled to Kashmir. She went to Haiti. She's a person who was a runner. She represented the United States of America in the first ever Muslim Olympics in Iran, and her shoes were part of the traveling Islamic exhibit that went to the Children's Art Museum all across the country. And she went to Mayo, Harvard, and UCSF, and has done, just been on the front lines advocating for her students, especially during this war in Gaza. And doing the best to make sure that people are aware of the healthcare crisis, both here and abroad. So that and a mother of three.
Oh my God, it's true. She definitely, she reached down. What I really love about what she's done is she's reached down, grasped the hand of Wajahat Ali and brought him up. And I think that shows a real spirit of giving, of charity, maybe, and
patience, kindness.
For sure. No, Dr. Qureshi, we love you. We admire you. Thank you for all you're doing for healthcare that will pay dividends. I mean, that's it's a great example, a great place to start. We're also in a moment where another woman, we can be recognized that, if we had had this conversation last week, Something different would have been, the way we talked about it. But in fact, President Biden has dropped out of the race, as every single person who's not under a rock knows. And it seems certain that Vice President Harris is going to be the candidate for the Democratic Party. I'm curious. You're someone who really is, you're in the news, you're on the news, and you write about the news, you really think about it. Where were you when you heard about this change, and what was your immediate, take on what had happened?
I remember I caught it on social media and I was with my kids, and a part of me was just like a flood of emotions. I remember, and I was with three kids, and I tried to, my wife was doing something, so I had all the kids to myself, and I was trying to pay attention to the kids, but I was also trying to read. And while I was trying to read this, my kids were bothering me, and I'm like, just give me a second. Then I realized it's not my kids' fault. They're just being kids. And it took me a second to process it because we have to just acknowledge the moment, Paul. uh, Never in our lifetime has a sitting president voluntarily relinquished power. Not just power, but this is the most powerful seat, most powerful job, the commander in chief of the most powerful nation. And for whatever reason, we'll find out later, I'm sure. I'm sure it's a confluence of reasons, perhaps his health, the poll numbers, internal mutiny, realizing the party was divided, all of the above. He makes the decision, two big decisions. I will not seek re-election. Huge. Number two, immediately thereafter, about 4 minutes later, we got the second tweet, right, or the post, and I endorsed Kamala Harris. And that's when I was able to breathe a sigh of relief. Why, Paul? Because my concern and the concern of many people of color, especially Black people, based on what we heard the past 2 weeks, mini primary, blitz primaries, open primaries. I'm like, wait a second, didn't 81 million people vote for Biden and Harris? Isn't the job of the vice president to step in if anything happens to the president? Are they actually going to bypass the first Black Indian woman? And many of us, and I think we were correct, the answer is yes, some people wanted to bypass her. But the fact that he did those two big things, he decided to step down for the betterment of the party, which meant the betterment of democracy, because he realizes the threat is not just Trump, but MAGA, who do not care about democracy. And I'm sure we'll talk about this. They want a dictatorship. And then he passed the torch to a Black woman. And this is why I just want people to sit with this for a second. I criticize Biden for his policies in Gaza. I think he's been a moral failure. I do not praise or worship politicians. I never have. I do not follow the cult of personality. I believe they're servants of the people. There are tools that should be used strategically to do the most good. But when they perform well, I want to give them credit. Joe Biden, what he's done, and I think this will go down with his legacy. He was an elderly white man from Scranton who stood beside the first Black president, served him loyally. He came out of quote unquote retirement to transition the nation, literally to save the nation from a Trump dictatorship, right? Literally, we've been in fight, flight, freeze mode for the past 4 years. And I always joke, right? Like in Dunkirk, Churchill said survival is victory. Our victory for the past 4 years is survival. He was a transition president. And then third, what does he do? He hands the baton as an 81-year-old white man to, inshallah, the first Black female president. And during his 4 years, he appointed the first Black female Supreme Court justice. And I'm sure you saw his 12-minute speech yesterday, which I saw, recording this the day after the speech. Somber, sad, but also very selfless and hopeful. And it was a really touching moment. And so, I'm processing all of this right now. So what went from initial worry, fear about Democrats, concern that they'll bypass Kamala Harris, has now transformed, Paul, into palpable excitement. I'm excited to see grassroots movement. Black women, Black men, Latinas, South Asians, Asian Americans, young people, TikTok, Charlie XCX, Brat Summer, Beyonce, We Choose Freedom ad, $100+ million raised, and Democrats finally, for the love of God, going on offense and being mobilized. This is something that I feel like, where we're in, last thing I'll say is, we were in fight, flight, freeze mode. I believe, at least for this week, and we should embrace this, Paul, we have catharsis. We have release. We have, wait for it, laughter. We have joy. And it'll be an uphill journey. It's not lost upon me, but we need that joy. And if we can sustain that joy and that energy, I believe, Paul, that we will then witness in 4 months the election of the first Black Indian female president. And what better message, what better image? Who defeats a white supremacist vulgarian than a Black Indian child of immigrants?
I don't know that we can like ascribe it to this, but I do think that we can call it moral courage. We can ascribe a spirituality to it around what President Biden did, because it's hard to say I'm giving it up. Our grasp of anything that we can hold on to, and especially power, to open the fist and say, okay. I'm extremely interested in implication for the country, but almost like as like a case study for how someone can go through a process, and it was not easy, and
Nope.
there was a lot of resistance and a lot, but it happened, and it's just a really interesting, as we, you and I are, a lot of our work is within the context of religion and spirituality, and I think it's an interesting moment. And as you say, I think one of the really fascinating things about moving this into a contest between Donald Trump, who we've said a lot about, and we kind of know the Christian nationalist, kind of white supremacist, a way that he both rallies his base and presents his policies. Even the embodiment that Kamala Harris has of all of these different folks who have come to this country, the daughter, like you, the daughter of immigrants from different traditions coming together, coming from an interfaith family like myself, noting that this interfaith mixing, choosing to marry again in an interfaith way to the second gentleman now, into a Jewish family, and attending a Black, historically Black college, Howard University, and really, so she has navigated and celebrated this diversity that can be the hallmark of our country, which can be understood as the power of our country, and she embodies it. So it does make the country, this election that we're in the middle of very poignant in that way. And I'll say, it's just as far as your joy comment, it's been very interesting to see, what has been taking off in social media. You and I both have spent probably far too much time on social media, but like, I've just seen a lot of her dancing with younger people, with like in like a step line and all of that, and it's just it does elevate the spirit, to imagine, okay, like this is going to be a slog for sure, but in some ways it can inculcate joy as well if we decide to make it that way. So I think it's we're in a really interesting moment. Now, you spend a lot of time on, I would describe it as right wing media. You have become almost like they like you. I think in part because like you're very forthright, you're very clear, you're a little too convincing probably for them, but you're also like you have this incredible wit and humor about you, which I think is often in short supply. And so I'm just curious how you have been experiencing the reaction across the aisle, and what have been what you've been seeing as far as obviously that they thought they were running against one person, and they were talking about how terrible it is that someone could be so old, and then all of a sudden now it's like, yeah, old isn't bad, just curious, like what has been your experience as you go on some of these shows and are kind of the token more progressive voice.
Yeah, I think the correct word is I'm a masochist, and the timing of your question is perfect because right before I decided to be a masochist and do a 3 versus 1 panel on Piers Morgan, where we talked about Kamala Harris. And what I noticed, and I could tell you, it's been like what, a week now, since almost a week since it's been announced that she, it was going to be running for president and Biden stepped down. And you could tell they're completely flat-footed. You can tell they went all in and attacking Biden in his age because they got nothing. And I'm telling you that the only thing that they had, and it didn't even stick, was borders are, borders are, borders are. She is not the border czar, folks. There is no border czar. President Biden didn't make her the border czar. She wasn't the border czar. She was given a responsibility to go talk to Central American countries, right, to find a way to engage in a policy that could, reduce the number of migrants. But she's not the border czar. So the only thing they had me on a gotcha was border czar. But even that gotcha wasn't a gotcha because they played these clips, Paul, and I'm like, awesome. I've heard the clips. Nowhere in those clips did President Biden, Kamala Harris, or Democrats call her the border czar. But like the media, I'm like, the media has been wrong. What, this is all you got? And even Piers Morgan himself, who has emerged as a defender of Trump, especially after the assassination attempt. I was on his show right after the failed assassination attempt, and he told me Trump won. He said, it's done. I saw the photo, him raising the fist. It's over. He won. And I'm like, last time I checked the elections in November, he goes, it's over. And you could tell there's palpable fear here because they realize their misogyny isn't working. And there was a woman there from the RNC, and she was, kind of without saying it that, hey, Donald has to change his tone, his temperature. And I said, I can't gaslight you folks. I've been covering this man for 9 years. He is 78 years old. This man will not change. If you thought he'd change, I give you the RNC. He lasted for 30 minutes, and then he said 9,000 extra words where he just completely devolved. I give you literally his rally in Charlotte, where he did not a 180 after a near-death experience, a 360. And so there is a palpable understanding on the right wing that this man is a misogynist, that this man has chosen another misogynist, J.D. Vance. The clip of him talking about, cat ladies has gone viral to the point where
God.
Rachel, Jennifer Aniston, who doesn't weigh into politics, has come out and said this is horrific that someone could say this. And when you lose Rachel, that means you're a step away from losing Karen. And I think the fact that...
Well, wait. I just want to make sure our listeners kind of followed that. This is Rachel from Friends, who's Jennifer Aniston. And not everybody has that exactly in the front lobe of their mind like you do, apparently. But it is interesting. I had not seen that she had referenced
today.
that clip.
So as of
okay.
Today she did.
Wow.
So
yeah. I know. When I heard that, I was like, J.D. Vance, what? Has anybody media trained you? I mean, like, why would you say that? I mean,
there's
it's
multiple quotes.
Oh, yeah.
And so, what they realize here, and you could tell because it was really interesting, Paul, is they tried to pivot. And the only thing they could pivot to was immigration, and borders are. They realized they're stuck with Trump. I said on his show, Trump peaked last week. He survived the assassination attempt. He had the photo. He had the RNC. He coronated J.D. Vance. They had a week of the RNC. And now he's back to who he is. From here on out, it's either going to be plateau or down. Meanwhile, you have palpable energy from women, young people, people of color. And what I said, and have been saying for years, is Republicans have underestimated the righteous rage of women. They have not forgotten that Donald Trump is a rapist. They did not forget his misogyny against Hillary Clinton. They do not forget Roe v. Wade being overturned. And now they see clips of J.D. Vance mocking these quote-unquote single childless cat ladies as being miserable. I'm telling you, there are women on the fence, independent women, even some conservative women who I think, Paul, my prediction, on the deal, not telling their Republican husbands, are going to come out and vote for Kamala. Or at the very least, not vote for Donald. And I think they're stuck because, as you said, the old guy now is the oldest person to ever run for president, 78-year-old Donald, who is a what? Criminal convict. And running against who? A prosecutor. A misogynist running against a woman. A white supremacist running against the daughter of immigrants. And you better believe, and we haven't even talked about the funniest thing. This was the funniest thing. I mean, you're 3 against 1 and you sit there and you evaluate your performance. And I'm always hard on myself. And I sit there, I'm like, I gave myself a B. I could have been sharper if I slept more. They actually said this, which I thought was hilarious. And I wanted to respond. They said, we're going to run on policy and we're going to win. And I'm like, yes, please. Project 2025. Yes, please. I think they're stuck. And Frank
Right,
Lutz,
right.
who is that Republican pollster who always talks to like white, undecided voters, he was on before me. He openly said, he goes, "This is now a tight race. The edge that Trump is gone. This is anyone's race." And he openly told Pierce that energy is palpable, and and Republicans should be paying attention. This energy is something I haven't seen in a long time.
Do you predict, and I want right here on the State of Belief, do you predict that Trump is going to dump J.D. Vance?
Uh,
Come on the record. Let's go.
will Donald Trump carry JD Vance to term? Uh, Let us ask. If I were him, I would dump him. You know why? As of this recording, JD Vance has posted the lowest poll numbers in the past 45 years of any VP candidate. JD Vance has the charisma of a dead lettuce. JD Vance is called out as a fraud by white Appalachian writers. JD Vance will be exposed as a fraud, especially if Kamala Harris uses a Midwestern or Southern white as her DEI vice president. JD Vance is a rich boy, venture capitalist, the tool of Peter Thiel. And JD Vance has tripled down on misogyny. Childless cat ladies, blaming single people, saying they shouldn't have as much rights as parents, no fault divorce. Even Trump didn't talk about no fault divorce. He went into no fault divorce, no exceptions for rape or incest when it comes to abortion. I mean, there is such
Yeah.
ugliness there and such unlikability that, again, I know people joke about this frivolous comment, but if Jennifer Aniston, who is a pop cultural figure, a white woman beloved by white women, Rachel from Friends, is for the first time literally commenting and using this clip that has gone viral, you better believe, Paul, women are going to be pissed. And I'll also say this. This is an actual headline in American politics as of yesterday. JD Vance did not have sex with a couch. I'm not making that up, folks. That
Yeah.
literally was headline
Yeah.
news.
Yeah. Well, the other piece, and this is like, it is just so. This was so crazy, but I was starting to see all this stuff about J.D. Vance and gay. Is J.D. Vance gay? And
Huh.
it's because of this clip in his this short thing from Hillbilly Elegy, and it shouldn't be a thing, but it's out there now,
It's the
and
Streisand effect.
no, yeah, but he just he thought he was gay because he liked his best friend and he preferred his best friend to
Oh, I didn't
women.
know that.
And so then he asked his grandmother, "Am I gay because I like my best friend?" And she was like, "No, no, 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 no." And then and then said something vulgar. But it was just so funny that it came up. Like these things, and when you write a book like that, be prepared. For people to start, taking it out. And so anyway, the fact that it was kind of out there on social media and that I actually Googled it and it was like, what is this referencing? And found like something. It wasn't just a deep fake, but there was no there, but it's just fascinating. I'm
sorry to say this. I mean, it's a dirty aspect of politics, right? But it's like what LBJ said is he was talking about an opponent one time and he says, I know that guy isn't a pig effer, but I want him to deny it.
I
And
mean,
the Streisand effect is the more and more you deny something and it becomes the news, the more and more people pay attention to it. So the fact that the Associated Press had a headline, then had to correct the headline, then deleted the article about JD Vance not having sex with a couch, everyone is like, JD Vance had sex with a couch? No, he didn't. What do you mean?
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly the same thing. And, it's just like, it is really interesting. But if he, and also like, what I'm really curious about, and it's this phenomenon of all these, political figures, religious leaders, and others who really had a moral clarity that Trump was dangerous and that Trump could, should not be supported, and that I don't know if you saw the Pete Buttigieg thing on Bill Maher, but where he said like he talked about where at one point J.D. Vance called Trump an opioid and how very like what a severe insult that was given his background, and so I guess I'm wondering like how do how do people change as much as J.D. Vance did in such a short time? I mean, and this is not just him. Many religious leaders, mostly evangelical Christians, were, but not just. I mean, there's saw him as a danger, and saw like his moral failings and said, okay, well, this can't be the candidate. But then they flipped and now are some of his most ardent supporters. So what's your take on that? And by the way, there's a lot that's going on in this election, especially around politics and religion, that it feels like we just made it up, but it happens all around the world. How religious folks kind of coalesce around a powerful political leader. And I'm just wondering, what's your take on how people can change so quickly and embrace something that just recently they thought was abhorrent?
I think there's two reasons. Number one, let's remember that Lindsey Graham initially emerged in 2015 and 2016 as the most vocal critic of Trump and said that if
Right,
we elected him, we deserve to lose, right?
right.
And then next thing you know, he is his reek. And that is a Game of Thrones reference. We can use and that was me being very nice, by the way. I know families listen to this show. And then when they asked Lindsey Graham why you did the 180, and he said, wait for it, relevance. He knows that
Wow.
Donald Trump is now the figurehead of the MAGA party. He wants to be close to power. He wants to be relevant. So he will twist himself into a pretzel, jettison any sort of morality, ethics, values, self-respect, and kiss the ring. Ted Cruz is another one. This dude literally mocked Ted Cruz. He mocked Ted Cruz's wife. He promoted a conspiracy theory that Ted Cruz's father killed JFK, and Ted Cruz says, yes, may I have another? And then you see J.D. Vance. I didn't call him America's Hitler. You didn't call him America's Hitler. On these right-wing shows, they blame the left for inciting violence against Donald Trump, even though Donald Trump incited a violent insurrection. You know who called him America's Hitler? J.D. Vance. And he picked the guy who called him America's Hitler to be his vice president. So maybe he took it as a compliment because he also quotes Hitler. And according to General Kelly, who was his DHS secretary, he used to praise Hitler. The reason why J.D. Vance did it is because J.D. Vance is an opportunist, and he realized, aha, this is where the wind is blowing, and I want to become powerful, and I am a stone's throw away from the presidency if Donald Trump wins. So I will triple down and be even more Trump than Trump. He's a misogynist, I'll be more misogynist. He's a homophobe, I'll be more homophobic. He's a racist, I'll promote the white supremacist replacement theory. He's greedy, I'm but the tool of billionaires. I'm a venture capitalist. I will say anything and everything, and I will bring out my DEI wife and my DEI children, and to prove that this Republican Party that is racist is not racist. And then the second reason why I think, and this is a very important question for state of belief, I had a conversation with Robbie Jones. We all know Robbie Jones. He's the head of PRRI, Public Religion Research Institute, does fantastic polls,
Yeah.
specifically on religious communities and religious voters. And I'm going to put this up on Left Hook later today. Why do white Christians still support Donald? And what he was saying is they realize he's a vulgarian. They realize he's disgusting, but what they want is power. And they're losing people. They're shedding people. In fact, in the
Right.
past 9 years, more and more people are leaving. Now, you would think, Paul, that would inspire reflection. Why are we losing young people? Why are we using people of color? Why are we losing women? Why are we losing LGBTQ? But instead, what that's inspired is a zero-sum mindset where it's fight or flight, and they're tripling down, and they are going to win by any means necessary, and they want power by any means necessary. So they have seen Donald Trump as their flawed vessel and instrument that they
Right.
can ride to power. So
Yeah.
it's the same here. It's greed, power, relevance. This is why they're supporting him. And this is a story. And, we could talk about faith and religion. It's always nice when you could talk about this because you can't talk about it in other places. We've seen stories about this in all our holy books with all
Yeah.
of our prophets. God created Moses. He also created Pharaoh.
Right. Well, and the devil tempts Jesus by saying, "I'll give you all of the power of the world if you just follow me." Or you can, or you. And Jesus said, "No, I don't want that power." And so it's a really, it's a. It is absolutely, but it's really curious, and I do think it's another one of these reflection pieces. And I certainly, I think that this temptation of power and temptation of being able to exercise power and control over others, and planning for that, which brings me to turn to Project 2025. Of a legal background, and you don't have to be a lawyer to read this, but you have to. It's 900 pages. I assume you have not just taken this and curled up on your couch and read every word. But my guess is that you've looked into it.
Yeah.
What are some of your takeaways, specifically around what the implications are for a diverse society and also a religiously diverse society?
Trump's Project 2025 is the blueprint for authoritarian rule. I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that. It is, in a pop culture analogy that I can use, a Bond villain in the first 10 minutes of a Bond movie, finding James Bond, tapping him on the shoulder and say, hey, do you want to read my evil supervillain plot to take over the world? I have a slideshow. Yeah, 5 minutes. This is what the Republicans have done. And they're trying to distance themselves from Trump and vice versa. Nope, his fingerprints are all over it. Over 100 of the most leading influential conservative groups have backed it. It has the backing of the Koch brothers and leading conservative billionaires, and all of Trump's minions are all over this project. And he has praised the Heritage Foundation, and the Heritage Foundation president has in turn praised Donald Trump. He says this is his Project 2025. And the president of the Heritage Foundation, which is the main conservative group behind Project 2025, just 3 weeks ago openly said on Steve Bannon's show — Steve Bannon wasn't hosting at the time because Steve Bannon was in prison — he said, we're in the process of a second revolution, and it will be bloodless if the left allows it to be. It is also, Paul, a white Christian nationalist agenda. Do not underestimate the fingerprints and the DNA of white Christian nationalism around this 900-page document. I've been following it for a year. And in this document, what they seek to do on day one of the Trump presidency is learn from the mistakes, the amateur mistakes of the 2016 Trump administration. The failed coup was a dress rehearsal. They're going to purge the government of anyone who is seen as not being loyal enough to Trump. Specifically in the summer, more people should be talking about this. Heritage Foundation has given $10 million to a think tank that, as we're speaking, is identifying public servants right now who are not sufficiently loyal, and before the summer, they will put their names and photos up on a website.
Mm.
God
It's
protect
that
them
is
and their
yeah,
families, right?
yeah,
They're
yeah,
going to purge the
terrifying.
government. They're going to weaponize the DHS to make it like his personal SAVAK, his personal army to go against enemies. They're going to completely gut and destroy the Department of Education because they've had a 70-year war on public education ever since
Right.
Brown versus Board of Education and
Yeah.
desegregation. They're going to destroy the EPA, gut all regulations, gut all climate regulations, go after women's rights, go after abortion rights, IVF,
Right.
marriage equality, and they're going to go after Social Security and Medicare. It is a blueprint for right-wing minoritarian rule. It is a blueprint for white Christian nationalism. It is a blueprint for power and a Trump dictatorship. And as we know, Trump said he will be dictator for a day. And what we know is dictators aren't just dictators for a day, they're dictators for life.
Yeah, there's never dictator for a day is not actually a thing. One of the things that you and I have talked about in the past is this kind of real war on public education, on libraries, on and this sense of like who gets to control the thought. Basically, if you can control schools, if you can control libraries, it means you can also control knowledge. And
Yep.
and I had the privilege of speaking at the American Library Association and just saying, like, you know words and stories are the foundation of sacred traditions, and if you're trying to curtail those, it's a threat to religious freedom as well as the democracy. And so I'm curious, what you've been hearing, and you just mentioned it as part of 2025, the Project 2025, but what we're seeing in Oklahoma, for instance,
Yep.
and one of the writers of the, I think of the Project 2025 has now joined in Oklahoma to dictate kind of the curriculum that includes the Bible, and by the way, I, I'll just say, like, my personal soapbox is like, you say you want the Bible to be in the in public schools. Well, who's going to teach it, and who's going to decide? Is it going to be me? You want me, like, from a commie Christian like me? I mean, who's going to do that? And
Well, it's indoctrination. It's very deliberately that they're going to purge textbooks, and very deliberately, as they said, they're going to teach the Ten Commandments and the Bible, and very deliberately they're going to weaken public schools and replace them with quote unquote
right,
charter schools and voucher
right,
schools. And in Arizona, CNN did a really good investigative report that each time these voucher schools and charter schools come up, it comes at the expense of, number one, the public schools, and number two, these are, wait for it, white Christian conservative schools. Surprise, surprise. Oh, look at
well,
that. What a shock.
yeah,
And the reason for this, folks, and I'm glad you talked about public education. And this is why, in a strange way, I don't know who she's going to nominate for vice president. I think that it's a good bench. The reason why, I like many of them, but Tim Walz is a teacher from Minnesota, the governor.
hmm,
Uh, I think putting the focus on teachers, on education, on books is really
hmm,
crucial, because I don't think most Americans know about the 70-year war of the right wing on education. For folks who
right,
don't know, the culture war didn't start with abortion. That came later. That was the 70s, right, with Falwell. It has always been public schools. It started with Brown versus Board of Education, which, by the way, Clarence Thomas says he wants to quote unquote revisit. So heads up, folks, which desegregated public schools. And ever since then, the right wing has been animated because they think that public schools are an incubator. They do not have control over public schools, and they want their own schools. They believe they've lost the majority. So if you can weaken public schools, you can weaken quote unquote indoctrination. You can replace it with Christian indoctrination. You can weaken the teachers union, which, by the way, leans very Democrat. And you have another capitalist chip where you can privatize these schools and make more money, right? They also want to ban books. They also want to ban quote unquote CRT and DEI. We saw in Georgia, they just reversed themselves because I'm sure they saw the poll numbers where 2 days ago they banned AP African American Studies, and just yesterday they reversed it. And Jason Stanley has come out with the book that he'd given me advance copy of. It's coming out in September. You should have him on. He's a scholar of fascism. It's called Erasing History. And it talks about
ah,
how this attack on history, on
yeah,
language, on
right,
knowledge,
right,
the culture bomb that fascists have employed. Mussolini did it, the Nazis did it, British colonial empires did it in Africa. And this is what MAGA wants to do, right? To control history, to revert to this pure romantic vision of an America that never existed, in which the white Christian man was at the top, given this duty by God to purify this land of pagans and savages. But it's these woke DEI, gay, liberal, lefty anarchists who are sullying this pure
right.
land,
Well,
and
it's
they must be
poisoning the
purged.
bloodstream, poisoning the bloodstream. I mean,
No, vermin poisoning the bloodstream. So literally what we're seeing
yeah,
now,
yeah,
literally,
vermin,
folks,
exactly.
is
Yeah,
what Mussolini did and the Nazis did. And
yeah.
MAGA is following in their footsteps.
Yeah, it's a very we're it's a perilous time, but I do think that there's some, there's some opportunities. I one of the things I do want to talk to you about is, we had Amy Spitalnik on the show, and she mentioned that you and she had been on some panels together, and that, and this has been a very stressed time for interfaith relations, and certainly it's something I've been feeling, and I've the war in Gaza, and the devastation, and the October 7th attacks. I'd love to get your kind of take on that in the context of the broader, kind of what it looks like to be in coalition with people who sometimes you disagree with, really severely.
It's been very difficult. But Amy, let me put it this way. And I think this is the reason why Amy and I have gone along, even though we disagree on certain things, but we agree on like 8 out of 10 things, right? Amy is a Zionist Jewish American, very liberal. I think the first female head of Jewish public affairs,
JPAC, yeah, that's
JPAC,
right.
right?
Yeah,
And we've done like 6 or 7 panels with me, her, and Eric Ward. I'm sure
yeah,
your listeners know Eric Ward
yeah,
from
yeah.
Race Forward, a black man who has condemned and talked about how white supremacy is intertwined with anti-black racism, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia. So we have gone kind of like it's the beginning of either a hilarious joke or a bad joke. A Jew, a black man, and a Muslim walk into a room to create solidarity against Thanos, which is not a college protester, but white supremacy. And it's gone over really well. The problem is in the past 10 months, as you know, Paul, that people don't want to talk. There's litmus tests. If you are pro-Palestinian, you're seen as the enemy, or according to Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday, not just an enemy, but doing the work of Hamas and doing the bidding of Iran, which is really interesting to say about Jews who occupied peacefully the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol 2 days ago and said, not in our name. Apparently to them, they're Hamas, or the family members of the hostages who literally flew from Jerusalem to DC to protest Netanyahu and got arrested. Apparently they're Hamas, but I digress. And then, on the flip side, within progressive spaces, it's very difficult because progressives are like, I want to be in alliance with Jewish Americans, but if you're supporting what we call a genocide, this is where the rubber hits the road. And unfortunately, this has bled over to people saying, I won't talk to any Zionists. And what I see, and the reason I put myself out there and I get hated from all sides because I'm a masochist, is no one's going back, Paul. And I want people to think about the big picture. And no one often does because we're seized in the moment. Muslims aren't going back. Arabs aren't going back. Palestinians aren't going back. Jews aren't going back, both in Israel and Palestine and here. Uh, Jewish Zionists, they're, in some capacity, however they define themselves, the majority of Jews are Zionists. They're not going to vanish overnight. You know who's also not going to vanish? The multiracial, multicultural coalition that wants freedom for Palestinians, that includes Jews. They're not going to vanish. You know what's here that is attacking all of our communities, that has deliberately preyed upon this conflict to do a divide and conquer? White supremacists. You know what has risen in the past 10 months as a result of this failed war, this genocide? Anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, both here and abroad, that has resulted in a Palestinian kid being shot, a Palestinian kid being killed, Wadia in Chicago. The forces behind Project 2025 and Trump, they hate Jews, Muslims, and Arabs. The reason why they love Israel, and Jews aren't stupid, they realize this. Benjamin Netanyahu's core group is not Jews, folks. It is white evangelical Christians and the right wing. The largest Zionist group in America is not Jews, it's Christians United for Israel, led by Pastor Hagee, an evangelical Christian. They love Israel. And the reason they love Israel, Paul, as you know, is because they believe in their end of times theology that Jews need to control Jerusalem as a necessary precondition for Jesus to come back. And then when Jesus comes back, the two groups that die first are Jews and Muslims. They love Israel, Paul. They don't love Jews, which is why Trump has embraced Nick Fuentes and Nazis, very fine people, use Hitler's language, promoted the white supremacist conspiracy theory. And my fear is that Israel and Palestine will be a wedge issue that will divide this multicultural, diverse coalition that is needed in this moment, Paul, to confront and beat white supremacy. We need a multiracial, multicultural, pro-democracy coalition to go up against MAGA. And for people who think I'm just BSing, I give you Hungary for an example. Viktor Orban, the authoritarian leader of Hungary, whom Republicans love and openly said that is their model for America. In Hungary, when the pro-democracy coalition splintered, fascist movements won. And fascist movements historically have never gone the majority. They get what? 38%, 35%, 42%, but that's enough for them to get in power. So what I'm begging people to do is you can simultaneously hold these truths together. Joe Biden has been a moral failure on Gaza. What's happening right now in Gaza is a genocide. Israel has become extremely right-wing. Zionism, as identified by Benjamin Netanyahu and Ben Gvir, is a poison for Israel, Israeli security, for Zionism, for Judaism, for Palestinians, for the region. It is in the interest of all people that you have a diplomatic solution. Military solutions have failed. Palestinians deserve to be free, and the occupation and the settlements have a peace agreement where Jews and Palestinians can live side by side or together with peace. And the sooner this happens, the sooner there will be peace and security for all of our people. That being said, it's a big inshallah Hail Mary pass. Until that happens, if you can, agree on 6 to 7 to 8 things, if you can't agree on 3 things. Do you agree that Jews and Muslims and Arabs have a right to be the co-protagonists of the American narrative? Do you agree that our families deserve to be safe? Do you agree that we have the right to worship in our synagogues and mosques and churches? Do you agree that Donald Trump is an existential threat to this democracy? Do you agree that white supremacy is a threat? Do you? Wonderful. You're my ally. I don't agree with you on everything, but on this, let's link arms. Don't ignore our differences. Talk about them. And the last thing I'll say is the reason I think why Amy, myself, and Eric are successful is we don't ignore the elephant in the room. Oftentimes in these interfaith spaces, and you know this, Paul, it's just not, it's what I call hummus theology. You eat hummus. I eat hummus. Let's eat hummus. Should we talk about Israel, Palestine? No, 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 no. And this thing just festers, festers, festers. But if you sit with the discomfort, if you have people air their truths, if you hear things that make you uncomfortable, but you stay in the room, as we have done, what we have seen, Paul, in the past 10 months, having done this now, I think 7 or 8 times, is instead of constriction, there's expansion. Instead
Mm.
of anger, there's catharsis. People feel heard. People are able to tolerate discomfort. Discomfort is not the same thing as like not being safe. And furthermore, you're able to push the conversation forward and sit there and be like, okay, I heard you. I didn't die. I didn't melt. I didn't punch you in the face. We're still here in the room. Let's move forward. And
Mm.
that's what I've seen, Paul. I'm sorry for this rant, but I feel like for
No,
this
no, I think
audience in
it's really
particular,
important.
I
Yeah.
hope they listen.
It, no, I really think it's important, and you know, there's things you said that I totally agree with, and things you said I don't agree with, and that's the point here: is that we're not going to be, we can't just talk to people who absolutely agree with on everything. And within the Muslim community, that's true. I mean, I know that you are not like you've gotten it as much from your own community as outside of your community, and
Oh yeah,
same
they're
with
not fans. They're not
well,
fans.
no, I mean some are though. A lot of people are, and I have the same thing with me. Is like I'm often like I'm not enough on your side, so I'm but I do think that they're hopefully they're and I admire it, and it's hard work. But for those of us who are committed to, as you said, multiracial, multi-religious, multi-ethnic America, we have to recognize that we can't just splinter. That's not even an option. I mean, and so somehow we have to figure out ways to be in community within disagreement, and
Right.
figure out
Absolutely.
ways to not participate in the wider demonization of one another that is very quick, and and frankly is it's pretty easy to do that work. I mean, it's really easy to write people off. Like that can feel good in an immediate moment, but it's not ultimately, I think, a recipe for moving forward. So I just I again I like same with Amy and same with Eric. Like there's just like the willingness to put yourself out there, and the willingness to kind of take it from your own community, because Amy gets it from her own
Oh
community.
yeah. Oh yeah.
And
Well, she got it,
and
I mean, Amy got it because Amy was part of that 3-person panel with AOC recently.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
AOC got canceled by the Democratic Socialists for
right,
hosting Amy, who is very reasonable. You could disagree with her, reasonable, liberal. You'll agree with her for like 8 out of 10 things. But Amy gets it, AOC got it. But I recommend people doing this, because I know there's probably some faith leaders here. We need you to step into discomfort. We need you to take some arrows. We need you to break some eggs. We need you to sacrifice some of your comfort in the present moment for the long term. Because, folks, nobody is going anywhere. Nobody is going
right,
back. You
right.
can't snap your thumbs, call all these pro-Palestinian protesters Hamas, and just think magically they'll disappear. It's not going to happen. Just like you
Right.
can't say, I will never engage with the Zionist. You're banking on like what, millions of Jews just overnight not becoming Zionist? Maybe that'll happen. I don't think it will in my lifetime, Paul. So we live in this shared real estate, in this shared space where we have shared threats. Let's find a way forward. And at
Yeah,
the same time, advocate for peace and justice.
yeah. Yeah, I think I just think it's really important, to mention that, and this is not, you're not new to this. I mean, I remember you did some reporting where you actually talked to settlers, and you've been involved in some of the, in a lot of the Israel Palestine work before this. So you're not like just stepping in. You've been really thinking about this, and so it is. It's hard work, but I just, I think it's really important that we listen to one another, and find all the things that we can work together on, because as a, Interfaith Alliance, just people walking out on one another doesn't help when we're trying to create safe schools where everyone can learn. You know what I mean? Like, if we're walking out because we disagree on really important issues on other things, but we actually have similar goals, how can we stay together? And how can we actually show up for one another and insist that, anti-Muslim, anti-Arab hate and anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish hate, we don't want that in our communities? And can we show up for one another? And I think that's really, really important. You're a little bit of a free agent. So, like, and I mean, I know that doesn't mean that everything in your life is free, but you do a lot of media. What are, over the next, as we move into kind of both the election, but then also like what comes after the election, what are you really focusing on? I mean, there's like the immediate thing around like the candidates and who's going to win the election, but what are the broader context in American democracy? What's
Yeah.
something that like either keeps you up at night? Like what are the things that you're like, I wish we could talk about this more, people?
Everything keeps me up at night. I think to simplify, we're dealing with democracy versus dictatorship. I have my criticism of the Democratic Party, as one should. Like I said, I do not kneel to any political party or politician, but we're dealing with there's no both sides here. We're dealing with the Democratic Party with all its flaws, is a party that wants to embrace and advance freedoms versus a dictatorial right-wing movement. Let's be honest, that wants to take away our freedoms, where Donald Trump has refused to accept that he lost the 2020 election. And in the debate, he refused to admit that he'll accept the 2024 election results. He was asked 3 times, and he led a violent insurrection, and he's a criminal. And now that mindset of criminality and insurrection and conspiracy theories has contaminated the entirety of the conservative movement and led to Project 2025. Something that I am curious about, and I hope, and I can only pray and hope and use whatever limited powers I have, is to pressure the Democratic Party, for once in your life, accept the fact that you're a multiracial movement. Your shadow is black. Don't be afraid of your shadow, which is black, which is also the color of your strongest, most loyal base. Black voters, black women. Do not be afraid that you have women in your base, young people in your base, gay people in your base, immigrants, Latinos. For so long, we have seen Democrats shy away. Even in the past three and a half years, Paul, let's be honest, we can't gaslight people on democracy-ish. Danielle and I have been telling Democrats, why don't you unleash Kamala Harris? And they were afraid. Ooh, the polls, she's black, she's a woman. Oh, they kept her hidden. Well, now this is the face of your party, a black Indian woman. Will you be bold for once? Will you embrace this vision of America? Will you show it? Will you elevate these people as surrogates, as delegates? Will you unleash a Jamie Raskin and an AOC, a Gallegos and a Castro, a Mark Kelly and Tim Walz, and Andy Bashir and a Gretchen Whitmer? And will you not just embrace these people? Will you empower these movements, these grassroots movements? Will you share openly policies of much needed progressive reform that you have been so scared to share because of the magical undecided voter in the Rust Belt who wears a MAGA hat, who's going to vote for Trump, right? And we saw little inklings of this, in that 12-minute speech, the farewell speech, if you will, kind of a farewell speech that President Biden said. One of the things he said, which was pretty bold, talked about Supreme Court reform.
Mm,
When you saw that We Choose Freedom ad that came out, I think today, great ad,
right.
Beyonce. I love the fact that they're embracing patriotism. That's something that Democrats have. They shied away from it. They always ceded it to the violent insurrectionists, Trump and MAGA. I've been saying this for months. Embrace the word freedom. We choose freedom. We're not going back. We're going forward. And then you saw the images. Kamala Harris. You saw they spent, I don't know if you saw this, Paul, they spent a good 3 seconds. Something I picked up on the pride flags, on those people waving the pride flags. It wasn't a quick half-second cut. It was a good 1,000,
I
two
definitely
thousand.
noticed that. I
You notice that?
definitely noticed that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh, that's a change.
Yeah.
They didn't shy away from it. They didn't shy away from the black women and the Latina women who were there.
Yeah.
So this is where it is an inflection point. It is a moment of crisis, but also a moment of opportunity for the
Yeah.
nation and the Democratic Party. Democratic Party, you're what we've got in this two-party system. Will you stand up for the people who have been marginalized? Will you stand up for the people who have been in the shadows? Will you stand up for the rest of us who have always helped carry you across the finish line? But it's that Sex in the City episode. I never watched that show. I saw one episode in college. It always stuck in my mind about how there was this guy who kept dating one of the women, but he kept taking her to these underground restaurants, and she realized she was a side piece. He never took her to like the overground restaurants. So I felt like the rest of us have been like the dates at the underground restaurants. Will they invite us to the ball? Will they invite us to the ball?
Well,
Or
I just want to say,
will
yeah.
we ride the pumpkin? That for me,
Yeah.
that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah. Well, I think you, if you're looking for inspiration for more of your political views, you should probably really spend some time on Sex and the City. So I really feel like, Waj, that's something that you haven't done enough of. I do want to just spend a minute on the Left Hook. Congratulations,
Thank you.
Substack, and not just a once in a while Substack. You really use it. So talk to me about. I mean, you're someone in some ways, like many of us who have kind of ridden the wave of technology. Like, what's the way people are getting information now? What are the ways that we can contribute? Substack certainly is one of them. What has been your experience of using that, and what are some of your goals for the Left Hook?
Yeah, so to answer that question, unfortunately, what we have seen is an erosion of trust in legacy media institutions.
Yeah,
I believe having a robust fourth estate is necessary and important for a democracy, but also for an informed citizenry. Unfortunately, the reason why not just the right, but also the left, especially in the past month, as we have seen, has completely lost trust in CNN and MSNBC and New York Times is because they realize they're engaging in a both sides horse race while our freedoms and democracy are on the line. And they are beholden to corporate media guidelines, the North Star of corporate media, Paul. And look, I was for a year, I was at CNN as a contributing op-ed writer, contributor, excuse me. I was contributing op-ed writer for New York Times. I've had a foot in these
yeah,
industries, but I've been mostly a Ronin and independent. But I've seen enough over 20 years. And I could tell you, a lot of good journalists, a lot of people who care, but the North Star of corporate media is ratings, access, views, and clicks. And people are tired of being gaslit. I'll give you an example. 2 weeks ago, Trump has changed. He will be serene. He is now pensive. He will be a unifier. And people are like, what the are you talking about? Both sides. Biden stumbled. He misspelled a word. Nonstop coverage for 2 weeks. Yesterday, friggin' Donald Trump couldn't say the word abortion, right? And people, so you could tell the majority is like, I'm done. I can't be gaslit to. And so people are moving away, unfortunately, from traditional media, legacy media, which is betraying, in my opinion, the voice and perspectives of the people. And they're moving towards the wild, wild west for better and for worse. And wild,
yeah.
wild west is TikTok and Instagram. My children, ages 9, 8, and 3, do not watch TV. They watch YouTube, they watch TikTok, they watch Instagram. So I realized, and when I came in as a young man, I was 28. I had to give a lecture to traditional journalists about new media. And they called me a new media journalist. I'm like, I am? They're like, you are. I'm like, okay. And they said, tell us about the Twitter and what's happening with the Facebook and the blogs. And I was like, all right. And now you have TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, for better and for worse, Paul, and you have Substack. And so Substack was after me for 2 years, and I kept saying, no, eh. And then I realized, you know what? I'm sick and tired of this. I don't think corporate media is going to change. They haven't been agile. They haven't evolved. They haven't adapted. Lo and behold, the past month, I was right. And I got sick and tired of always asking for permission. So I joined up on Substack 40 days ago, to write in a way that could be unleashed, and to write in a voice that I think a lot of people wanted. They desperately wanted this on cable media, but they weren't getting it. And also to build, Paul, what I call the majority, a liberal information ecosystem that is dwarfed by the right wing, which is the minority, but gets billions of dollars, right? So I'm like, we have the numbers. Why don't we just build our own? And so the left hook, in part, helps amplify this existing ecosystem. And I've created alliances with a lot of our friends because I believe we're not going to get the big money. That's okay. Grassroots. We saw the power of grassroots in the past week when it comes to politics. We can do the same in media. And I've done it for 40 days. And I thought I would just do it like 2 or 3 times a week, but it feels like it kind of has revived me and my pen. I'm cranking out stuff every day. I'm doing interviews with people who I think should be getting primetime coverage, but they don't. Our friend Robbie Jones, Rula Jibril, experts who really have studied Project 2025 and Nelson, people, Jason Johnson, talking about Black voters.
Yep.
And I want to create an informed citizenry and I want to punch back. Figuratively, I believe you can punch a bully in the face. They deserve to be mocked, ridiculed. The emperor has no clothes, shame him for it. And I just don't see that in corporate media. And I've been very lucky that, I've been getting like my subscriber list has just been going up, 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 up. So there seems to be an audience thirsty for this. I've been very lucky.
Yeah, yeah. The Left Hook Substack, Wajahat Ali. You can find it, and get what is really a kind of a more constant stream than you might imagine. So, in some iterations, Substack is like, oh, my once a week Substack. But, you're using it almost more as like a blogging platform and, what we used to call, and which I think is, people are looking for, more consistent updates. And I think that's great. And,
And I've
I
tried, Paul, I've tried, and the proof is in the pudding. I don't half-ass it. I try to each post, I make it thoughtful. I spell check. I put in links. I do the research. I write it,
excellent.
because I have a lot of experience in writing op-eds. So, if you read it, I want you to sit there and go, I might not agree with him. I might, but he put thought into this.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's really important. And, I'll say as like a pat on my own back, but it was one of these things that, I was just very like, just one more thing. I just can't get on TikTok. I can't but then, we did as an organization, Interfaith Alliance, and what I would have considered a very boring sermon on Christian nationalism, where I kind of break it down. It's now at like 700,000, views. And if 700,000 viewers have a language to describe Christian nationalism.
Absolutely.
And the comments are like very gratifying in the sense that they're like, I didn't know a religious leader would ever say this, a Christian leader would ever say this about Christian nationalism. You and I know that there's lots of people trying to say this, but for many people, they just think that, that's what Christians think. And they're, and so to be able to reach people who are in these new media, these, what are not that new, but, media spaces where they just might not have exposure to other folks. So I from way back when doing BeliefNet in 1999 to now, like as
Pour one out for BeliefNet.
I mean, for real. Yeah. That's
and
OG.
HuffPost, you were also at Paul was
HuffPost,
at BeliefNet. He was at HuffPost.
Yeah,
But it's very smart. You have to be agile and adapt. And a pastor needs to talk to the people and meet them where they are and speak in a language that they can understand.
Yeah. Yeah, and really meeting people where they are, and that's so it's been exciting and an interesting ride. So we talked about the Left Hook. You have a podcast, Democracy-ish, which I think is another place that you show up. So I want to end with what we kind of always end on this show, which is inviting some reflection on hope. And what gives you hope right now, Wajahat Ali?
Yeah, well, I'm writing a book on this, actually, and I have to interview you for it. It's a prospectus on this because, as you know, my daughter went through stage 4 cancer 4 years ago, and she had a full liver transplant, and we didn't think she would make it until the last second. There was an anonymous donor, literally at the critical last second, who stepped up and gave a piece of his liver to my daughter. He had never met her, and we found out who that was. That's Sean Zahir. and we just celebrated her 8th birthday a week and a half ago with an epic water balloon fight where I filled out 1,500 water balloons, and we had an amazing water slide that was like the best water slide ever with 2 lanes and super high up. And then I made a vow that any person who would come to our home to celebrate her birthday, young or old, visually impaired or visually not impaired, any color, any gender, would get soaked. And I was able to unleash the water balloons. And I also brought out the hose, and maybe there were some trays of water, but we got everyone. I'm mentioning this because there were moments in that journey, if you will, during her stage 4 cancer, where people said, "Oh, it's over. There's no way this will happen." And lo and behold, 4 years later, here's this beautiful, bouncy little diva with long, luscious hair, who just celebrated her 8th birthday. What I'm saying is, folks, don't obey in advance. Don't kneel. Don't give up. Hope is not just a frame of mind. Hope is an action. Hope is a muscle. You have to imagine a better future, and then you have to work towards it. You have to imagine that inshallah things get better, and then you have to create pathways to getting there. And that's why I have hope, because number one, because of my daughter. Number one, because our faith commands hope. Your faith, my faith. We never give up in God's mercy or any opportunity. It ain't over until it's over. And then finally, the last week, look what happened. People imagined a better future. They said, we aren't going back. And with their own hands, they did the work, and they created pathways towards success. And they raised more than $100 million. And they've come up with organizations and mobilizations and communities where now you have white women. White women are rallying. For once, we're like, yes, thank you, white women. And they're like, all right, black women did it, Latinas did it, Asians did it, white women, majority of us voted for Trump in 2016, 2020, not anymore. So this is giving me hope. And I think it's okay to feel hopeful in this moment, to feel joyful in this moment, to feel it. Feel it, even though there will be bumps on the road. Feel it, even though there might be setbacks. Feel it because there's 4 months left to the election. We don't know what's going to happen. Feel it, nurture it, sustain it, because hope is also contagious, Paul. And we need that contagion to spread for this multiracial, multicultural coalition that might disagree on a lot of stuff, but agrees that we need to preserve this democracy and strengthen it for all our people and save it from a right-wing dictatorship.
You can follow Wajahat Ali's writing on Substack. The handle is The Left Hook. He's also co-hosting the top-rated Democracy-ish podcast with Danielle Moody. And of course, Waj's book. It's titled Go Back to Where You Came From, and other helpful recommendations on how to become American. Do you have a title for your next book?
I mean,
you don't have to give it out.
Actually, you tell me what you think. Look,
let's go.
But tell me, I have a title. Here's the title. I'm sharing it for the first time. The Big Inshallah.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, lean into it. Let's do it. Inshallah. Yeah. And not the inshallah that means probably not, but let's just say inshallah, but the inshallah that means yes, and we can do it.
Not the inshallah of my dad. Are we going to Toys R Us? Yeah, inshallah. No, it's the inshallah we're going to win.
I love it. Okay. Waj, thank you so much for being with us again on The State of Belief.
Thank you so much, sir.
Please be sure to subscribe to The State of Belief at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform, or at stateofbelief.com/subscribe. We need your help to keep making The State of Belief become a partner in this crucial work with a financial contribution today. Information on how to donate is available at stateofbelief.com. That's stateofbelief.com. And share what you're getting out of this show with people in your networks. Let's get more people listening and keep these conversations going on Facebook and Instagram using the handle @StateOfBelief. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of Religion News Service or Religion News Foundation. The State of Belief is produced by Ray Kirstein and is a production of Interfaith Alliance. Become a member today at interfaithalliance.org. And be sure to join us next week. I can't wait. Until then, I'm Paul Brandeis Raushenbush on The State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet.